danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. Duck and Cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association.
Разрешите выразить благодарность от имени нашего съезда.
Deshalb friedfertig sein und mutig zugleich.
Fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish fake stories that simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Welcome to High Five Deep Dives. Today we'll be covering propaganda. I thought there would be no better time than an election year to cover this topic. And I don't know about you, but it seems like every piece of technology I own is getting constantly blasted with unsolicited propaganda all day, every day. Now, nobody loves mass manipulation more than I do. But in order to hop on the MK Ultra train with me, you need to understand a couple things first. So that's what we'll be doing today. We'll go over what it is, how it started, some notorious ways it's been used in the past, how it's being used right now, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Alright, let's dive in. To find out what we can do to combat propaganda, we first need to understand what it is. There were a lot of good definitions all over the web, but the one I found most suitable was straight from the dictionary. Propaganda is information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. Now, I saw a lot of other definitions inserting a negative connotation to the word, and yes, for the most part, it has been used for very evil things. However, propaganda itself is not implicitly evil. As you'll find out in this video, the lines between right and wrong, good and evil, truth and lies become very blurry. That, to me, is the most interesting thing about propaganda, and simultaneously the most disturbing. To highlight what I mean, we'll first go back to where it all began. We'll be discussing propaganda in a more modern context, all beginning with the ideas from one man, Mr. Edward Bernays. Often referred to as the founder of modern propaganda, or even sometimes the father of PR, Edward Bernays was born in 1891 in Vienna, Austria. His mother was the sister of the great Sigmund Freud. Yes, that Freud. Bernays used Freud's work in psychoanalysis and psychology to influence society in profound ways. He started out doing PR work for various corporations and high-profile people, where he honed his skills. These skills were recognized by none other than the United States of America. He was recruited by the U.S. Committee of Public Information, or sometimes referred to as the Creel Committee, during World War I. This experience showed him how mass persuasion could move a nation. He realized that public opinion could be manipulated by carefully crafted messaging, and he sought to apply these techniques during peacetime communications. In 1923, Bernays wrote his book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, in which he explained his ideas on public relations. He emphasized the manipulation of public opinion through media and propaganda, utilizing his uncle's ideas of subconscious desires. A key takeaway from this is that Bernays believed that the engineering of consent was essential in democratic societies. Other notable campaigns he ran which showcase his methods were the Lucky Strike campaign, which normalized women smoking and made Lucky Strike a lot of profits from the increased customer base. Dixie Cups, where he played a role on the fear of the public to have people start using disposable cups for sanitary purposes, again increasing the sales for the company. And oh yeah, there was this one company called Beech Nut Packing Company that wanted to boost their bacon sales. So Bernays skillfully influenced American culture to associate a hearty breakfast with eggs and bacon. These ideas are still taught today. That's what made Bernays so revolutionary. Instead of simply offering a product and waiting for the customer base to decide, he used psychological techniques to shape their desires and emotions, making them feel as though they needed the product, often without them even realizing they were being influenced. He would later take his PR skills to influence the public and aid in the re-election of Calvin Coolidge in 1924. However, he also showed how propaganda and PR could be used for evil, when he helped justify the CIA-backed coup in Guatemala in 1954. Bernays was hired by the United Fruit Company and led a PR campaign in America, portraying Guatemala's democratically elected government as communist, which played into U.S. fears of communism during the Cold War, and winning over the American public's opinion and intervention. The effects of this coup held lasting repercussions in Guatemala. Edward Bernays was no doubt a brilliant man. Whether he was evil or not, I'll let you decide that. I'll post some of his quotes on the screen. Many entities around the world observed Bernays' success and adapted his methods for their own agendas. Before we dive into specific examples, let's break down the various forms and techniques of propaganda. There are 3 forms of propaganda: white, black, and gray. White propaganda is open-sourced, accurate information that is presented in a way which promotes a specific agenda. Black propaganda is the deliberate spread of false or deceptive information which appears to come from a credible source, but its true intent is to mislead or misinform. Gray propaganda is information where the source and accuracy of the information is unclear. It often contains a mix of truth and lies, making it difficult to discern fact from fiction. From these 3 forms of propaganda comes countless techniques in how they are delivered. There are too many to cover them all, and the list continues to grow as time passes. I'll display some of the key techniques on the screen, and some that we'll be talking about today with their definitions attached. For now, let's shift our focus to some of the most successful propaganda campaigns in history, and the devastating outcomes that followed. The first propaganda campaigns we'll examine are the 2 American Red Scares. The first Red Scare took place from around 1917 through the early 1920s, and was sparked by the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. During this period, there was significant public unease, and fears of a communist uprising in America loomed large. The U.S. government capitalized on this anxiety, using fear-mongering propaganda to stroke hysteria. This fear led to mass deportations, arrests of activists, and suppression of civil liberties under the Espionage and Sedition Acts. Innocent people were targeted, leading to widespread paranoia. We'll highlight 2 key moments of propaganda techniques being used from the first Red Scare. The first is the Palmer Raids, in which Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer led a series of aggressive crackdowns against suspected radicals and anarchists somewhere between 1919 and 1920. During these raids, the press frequently published alarmist reports, while government officials made public statements warning of impending revolutionary uprisings. Imagine the hysteria that would ensue today if the government started raiding houses of innocent citizens and trusted government officials went on mainstream media to report secret uprisings brewing throughout all of America. Another significant example was the publication of the Red Menace, editorials and cartoons, particularly in big city newspapers, which depicted communists, socialists, and anarchists as dangerous, violent figures intent on destroying American values. The second Red Scare emerged in the United States after World War II, primarily during the late 1940s through the 1950s, as tensions with the Soviet Union escalated. Fueled by fears of communist infiltration in various aspects of American life, including government, education, and entertainment, this period was again remembered by its widespread anxiety and paranoia regarding communism. The US government leveraged this fear to instigate a campaign against suspected communists, often using extreme measures and questionable tactics. The second Red Scare saw the rise of McCarthyism, named after Senator Joseph McCarthy, who led aggressive investigations and hearings to root out alleged communists. These efforts resulted in public shaming, blacklisting, and an unjust persecution of many innocent American citizens, including government officials, artists, and intellectuals. The fear of communism led to a culture of suspicion, where even innocent people could be accused and have their lives ruined. McCarthy's infamous televised hearings, particularly the Army McCarthy hearings in 1954, showcased the extreme tactics used to instill fear and the dangers of unchecked power. Another significant example was the FBI's Operation COINTELPRO, which involved covert activities designed to surveil, infiltrate, and disrupt domestic political organizations labeled as subversive. This operation targeted civil rights groups, leftist organizations, and anti-war activists, often employing deceptive tactics to sow distrust and undermine movements that challenged the status quo. While the United States was grappling with anti-communist propaganda during the Red Scare, the Soviets across the ocean were simultaneously employing their own propaganda strategies to promote communism and shape public perception, presenting it as a positive and idealistic system. Soviet propaganda, which spanned from 1917 all the way to 1991, was a powerful tool used to promote the ideals of communism, control dissent, and maintain the Soviet Union's global influence. One of the most prominent propaganda techniques used was the cult of personality, where Soviet leaders like Lenin and Stalin were depicted as godlike figures embodying the will of the people. This narrative was reinforced through the technique of card stacking, where the regime highlighted the successes of communism while suppressing information about the widespread famines, purges, and human rights abuses. Additionally, the technique of glittering generalities was very prevalent. Phrases like workers' paradise and the people's revolution were used and designed to promote the illusion of a utopian society. Two key examples of Soviet propaganda's impact were the 5-year plans and the portrayal of the 1937 Great Purge. The 5-year plans, launched by Stalin, promised rapid industrialization and economic progress. Propaganda emphasized achievements in production, showcasing factories and technological advancements while concealing the severe hardships and famine that resulted from forced collectivization. The Great Purge, a campaign of political repression from 1936 to 1938, was also portrayed as a necessary measure to protect the state from enemies of the people. The propaganda depicted the purges as a means of ensuring national security. It was very effective in hiding the brutal reality of mass executions and imprisonment in the gulags. Through these examples, Soviet propaganda played a critical role in shaping public perception, distorting reality, and most importantly, maintaining control over the populace. I think it's an interesting thing to note that both of these countries had completely opposite ideologies, but used the same propaganda techniques to successfully control their populations. These techniques solidified the Cold War binary and justified nuclear arms buildups and proxy wars in countries like Korea and Vietnam. Nazi propaganda is another prime example of the devastating effects that a successful campaign could have. Orchestrated by Joseph Goebbels, this campaign led to the systemic extermination of Jews, Romani people, the disabled, and others that were deemed undesirable. Goebbels understood the power of mass media and transformed propaganda into a tool for social control, using techniques such as demonization, repetition, and scapegoating. His journal entries revealed a calculated approach where he emphasizes the need for consistent messaging to reinforce Nazi ideals. Goebbels took influence from Bernays' ideas and revolutionized it, using mass media at a scale and sophistication never before seen. For example, films like The Eternal Jew depicted Jews as vermin and a threat to society, fostering widespread hatred and dehumanization. Additionally, the pervasive use of posters and radio broadcasts, which repeated anti-Semitic messages, ensured that the Nazi narrative permeated everyday life. This reinforced the ideas that Jews were responsible for Germany's economic struggles, especially in the wake of World War I. This relentless campaign of propaganda not only incited public animosity, but also normalized the violence and atrocities of the Holocaust. By painting Jews as the ultimate scapegoats for Germany's troubles, Nazi propaganda made the population complicit or indifferent to the systemic genocide that ultimately led to the murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others during World War II. So far, we've covered some of the most notorious campaigns in recent history. These have caused the most devastation and are highlights of the extreme outcomes that successful propaganda campaigns can have. However, I would like to point out that not all propaganda campaigns have to end in mass casualties to have a profound impact. Many of them work subtly, gradually eroding individual rights and freedoms, fostering division, and consolidating power by manipulating public perception. Through fear-mongering, misinformation, and emotional appeals, these campaigns often justify restrictive policies or oppressive actions, leading to a society where personal liberties are curtailed and the balance of power shifts increasingly toward authoritarian control. In modern times, propaganda is more pervasive and sophisticated than ever. It has evolved into subtle and varied forms that blur the lines between truth, manipulation, and information. With the advent of digital media, social networks, and targeted advertising, manipulation is omnipresent, influencing everything from political opinions to consumer behavior. Let's break it down, highlighting 6 ways it is being used on a daily basis that you might not even be aware of. The first is propaganda in advertising. Advertisements utilize propaganda techniques to influence consumer behavior. Strategies like bandwagon, emotional appeal, celebrity endorsements, and glittering generalities manipulate perceptions and desires, often making consumers feel their self-worth is tied to what they buy. This shapes behaviors and reinforces consumerist ideologies. Second is propaganda in social media and digital platforms. Social media platforms exploit algorithms that prioritize engagement over truth, leading to echo chambers that reinforce existing beliefs and increase polarization. Disinformation spreads so easily, often driven by political agendas or commercial motives. Influencers act as modern propagandists, shaping public opinion through seemingly authentic content, contributing to a distorted perception of reality. Political propaganda. Even today, governments worldwide engage in propaganda under the guise of PR. Techniques like spin, fear-mongering, and appeals to nationalism often erode public trust and polarize societies. Creating factions that believe they hold the truth while dismissing opposing views is manipulated. Number 4 is corporations. Corporations shape public perceptions through tactics like greenwashing and astroturfing. These efforts manipulate consumer behavior and influence public policy to favor corporate interests over societal welfare, contributing to issues like environmental degradation and health crises. The news media shifts to infotainment. News outlets often present information with bias, influenced by corporate or political interests. Framing, selective coverage, and sensationalism prioritize emotional stories over factual reporting. This blending of news and entertainment can lead to skewed understanding of topics, making it easier for propaganda to thrive. Ideological propaganda in pop culture. Movies, TVs, and music all reflect and reinforce the dominant ideologies, promoting values like consumerism and promiscuity. This entertainment media shapes societal norms and perceptions, often glorifying material success and casual relationships. Although these portrayals may not have the immediate impact of political propaganda, they play a significant role in influencing collective consciousness over time, embedding these values into the cultural fabric. So, finally, we get down to it. What can we do about it? First of all, I just kind of want to say, don't think that they don't know what they're doing. It is all very deliberate and they are very good at it. Whole companies get paid millions, if not billions of dollars every year to find the best ways to manipulate you. They want you to think that you're defeated, that you lost and there's nothing you can do. It makes you easier to control. So, let's talk about some ways that we can fight back. I would say the first thing that you can do is to learn more about propaganda. Educate yourself on the forms and techniques that have been used and are being used. The fact that you're even watching this video is a great start. When analyzing propaganda, it's essential to approach it systematically to understand its purpose, form, and techniques effectively. So first, I would say to identify the form of propaganda. Is it white, black, or gray? Then identify the techniques that are being used. You can ask yourself, what emotions does this message aim to evoke? Fear, anger, pride? Next, determine the intent or purpose. Maybe it's for political, economic, social, ideological means. You can ask yourself, what change in behavior or belief is this message trying to achieve? Is there a larger agenda or movement that's being pushed through this message? The fourth step that you can take is trying to analyze the target audience. You can identify who the propaganda is targeting and why. Different forms of propaganda are tailored for specific audiences based on demographics, political affiliations, emotions, or cultural beliefs. And finally, assess the historical and social context. Propaganda often draws on contemporary fears, anxieties, and cultural values. So you can ask yourself, what historical events or social trends is this propaganda trying to tap into? Next, aside from trying to identify the propaganda, I would just say generally just always be curious and questioning and seek the truth. Continue to develop your critical thinking skills. Question everything. Make sure you're not settling into a routine way of thinking and have introspection often about your beliefs and where they come from. Another thing you can do is diversify your information sources. Don't be reliant on one media outlet or maybe one person on Twitter or Instagram to tell you your news. Get it from many different sources and compare and contrast the two, or three or four. I think the best thing that you can do is proactively do your own research. If you see something that interests you or maybe angers you or anything evokes your emotions, do your own research to find out if it's true And don't just settle on one source like we just went over. Try to find multiple sources that back up that claim so you can fact check yourself. Fact check regularly. I like it when I see social media companies trying to implement mechanisms to counteract propaganda. One recent thing I've seen recently on X is the implementation of community notes. I think this is a great example and such a good step in the right direction of putting the power back into the masses. And finally, engage in slow media consumption. Instead of just rushing to consume breaking news or share content immediately, take time to reflect. Slow down and consider what the message is and what the evidence is behind it. Being bombarded by constant information can make it really hard to think critically. Be selective about what you engage with and prioritize quality. Thank you for joining me in this video today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to check out my other videos where we dive deep into various topics. The truth may be harder to find, but it certainly still exists. We, the people, hold the power that they want to control, and we are the ones responsible to make positive changes in our future. I'll leave you with the quote from the father of propaganda himself. See you next time.